Let's talk about the meaning of meaning.
Well, it's yeah, it's an interesting topic, right? And it's not a topic that you're going to hear very often. But one of the things that fascinated me about your podcast and the reason that I wanted to do it today and to talk to you about this is because that what you're doing with your podcast is you are helping people to make paradigm shifts. This isn't just information that people go, oh, well, that's interesting. It's information that they can take and they can use and they can transform their life with it once they have that aha moment, right?
Right.
And so when we were talking about having this kind of conversation, I started asking myself, what are some of the aha moments that I've had in my own life that have been transformational for me? And one of the beauties of my age, which was also a paradigm shift, the idea that getting older is a good thing, not a bad thing, because I have a lifetime of experiences and transformations and perspectives that have made me more was a paradigm shift in itself. And I started thinking about it. And one particular lesson that has helped to define my entire life is this one question: what is the meaning of meaning? So, where did this come from? Let me give you a little context on that. So, I'm not just trying to talk to you, but with you.
Okay.
But it all started in my 20s when I read a book by an author by the name of Tom Robbins. So, Tom Robbins was a famous author in the 70s. He died recently. And in this book, one of the main characters kept asking the question, what is the meaning of meaning? And in my 20s, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. I read the whole book, I went through it, and I carried that book around like my own personal Bible for 10 years, still asking the question, what is the meaning of meaning? Right? So if
Yeah.
I ask you that right now, what comes to your mind?
The meaning of meaning is the thing that comes to mind is that there's no meaning except the meaning we give it.
Exactly. And that was what took me such a long time to come to that realization that nothing means anything unless I give it meaning. But there's danger in that, right? So I'm going to fast forward to A Course in Miracles, right? And, we both know Gary Craig was a big uh, uh, component or big, he loved Course in Miracles
Right.
or loves it. And I'm not a big proponent of Course in Miracles, but I did take the second lesson and the third lesson. And the second lesson is have you done Course in Miracles?
Yeah, a while back I did do it.
Okay, so you take the first lesson or the second lesson and you walk around your room and you pick up things and you say, this means nothing. And you pick up the next thing and you say, well, I can't see it, but this means nothing. And so you spend the day pondering that nothing in your world means anything. And then on the second day, you go back and you pick up the same items and you say, I give meaning to everything I see.
Right.
And that was transformational for me. And
Wow.
when we get into the realm of trauma, or we get into the realm of childhood trauma, or not even childhood trauma, but childhood beliefs that have carried us through an entire lifetime, we have to stop and ask what meaning was given to that experience, what meaning was given that to that thing or memory or whatever that I have in my life, and how is that defining who I am today?
Yes, totally, because it creates our self-concept and it
Yeah,
doesn't even have to be, people think it's about big trauma, like big, terrible crisis, but a lot of times it's just that something happened, and as children, we have no capacity to really
yeah.
process it, and we just decide in a moment, well, it must mean this, and then it literally becomes our belief system.
I think about this friend of mine. who was in a relationship with this woman, and they had a little boy. And my friend was a stay-at-home dad because she was a lawyer and made a whole lot more money than he did. So he's a stay-at-home dad with his little boy. And then she comes home one day as the primary breadwinner and breaks up the family. And this happened during 2020. And she basically kicks him out. They never tell the little boy that he's leaving. And then the entire country, I'm in Panama, the entire country shut down for a year. The courts were shut down, nothing was working. And so the whole time, the mom is giving the little boy, telling the little boy terrible things about his dad, that how he left him. Well, because nobody was giving him any other meaning, you already know that he had to apply his own meaning. And without context and without information, he will have applied meaning that will have affected him, that will be something like, I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
That unless he can shift the context and shift the meaning of that as he gets older with more information, that will never go away.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Yes. Because I mean, otherwise we can't make sense of things that happen to us. We have to make sense of them, right? In order to
Yeah.
feel safe, we have to make sense. So children say, well, because they don't want to believe that their parents aren't safe, because their parents are their everything, their resource. So they have
Right.
to create something that feels safe. And
Yeah.
typically they turn against themselves. They turn against themselves and they say, well, if I was more lovable, this wouldn't have happened
Yeah.
if I was better or more perfect or whatever.
Yep. Yep. They apply meaning, and that meaning that they have applied becomes dangerous to them, right? So I think about, I was watching a TikTok video not so long ago about this father who had just dropped his 7-year-old off at school. And the 7-year-old didn't want to go because they already saw through the meaningless of the system that we're all living in, right? Why do I want to go to school? So I can get good grades, so I can go on to college and get $200,000 worth of debt and then go get a job that I'm stuck in for 30 years until I can finally save enough money to retire. And the 7-year-old already saw through it.
Wow.
Right. So the dad was proud,
Yeah.
right? So me as an EFT practitioner thought, oh, depression, addiction, suicide. That's where this goes. If dad isn't able, or dad and mom isn't able to help give this child meaning in the experiences that they're going to be having throughout their life. Now, it doesn't mean that by the time this child grows up, maybe the system itself won't have changed enough that that person isn't going to have to finish 12 years of education, and that that person isn't going to have to go off to be a productive member of society. But if someone doesn't help that child to find meaning in the experiences that are going to happen, that child is going to dig deep into depression. And that child will probably end up with addiction because they will need a way to manage the fact that they have not been able to give meaning to the experiences, not given meaning. They've given meaning. They've given the meaning of meaninglessness
Right.
to the experiences that they're going to have. So I think about, you know, I'm considered Gen Jones. I'm in between a boomer and a Gen Xer. But I think about my parents or my grandparents. I grew up in a home with both, and how the meaning that they had applied to their life was really clean, right? They were going to get married, and they were going to go to a job, and they were going to stay at that job, and they were going to stay in that marriage for 40 years. And they were going to buy a house. And the template by which they created their life was clean, clear. Mom wasn't wondering what she was going to do for a living. She was going to have children, and she was going to cook and clean. And that was clear. And dad was going to go to work, and he was going to bring home the paycheck. And then they were going to raise their children and buy a house and then retire in 30 years. The meaning was already self-applied by society and it was clear. But today, when we look around, we see addiction and we see depression and we see suicide rates out of control. Why? Because we don't even know. Women now have so many options, right? They're still living this world in between having getting married and having children, if they even want to marry a woman or they want to marry a man, if they want to be a woman or be a man, right? Are they going to get a job where they work in a career? Are they going to have a profession? The amount of choices and the amount of pre-designed meaning has all been blurred. Now, if you look at social media, it's all about how bad relationships are. So even the concept of having a relationship nowadays has been blurred, right? So if you take a child like this young child of 7 who already sees through the traps of society, how do you help that child to create a meaning and a structure around that meaning that's going to serve them for a lifetime?
I see what you're saying because you can't just take the structure away. Say, okay, there's no meaning here, but not put something in its place.
Right.
What are you going to put in its place? Because otherwise, we're just drifting in a sea of, like you
Of
said,
possibilities.
yeah, and it's like cognitive dissonance. We're there's too many choices, and we're still kind of like there's this like echo of the past of the
Yeah.
roles that our mothers and grandmothers, grandfathers played. So there's this influence is still there, yet we're seeing through these illusions.
Right.
So how do you navigate that? Because a lot of people are having spiritual crises that
A
exactly what you're
lot.
describing.
Yeah, because to be forced to exist inside of a system that doesn't serve you, because all the illusions are gone. The illusion that if you get a job, you can stay there for 40 years. The illusion that if you have a partner, that partner is going to stay for 40 years. The illusion that if you have children, they're going to move in next door and you're going to create family and community. All of those things that were part of the first chakra experience that built the structure of our lives have been uprooted as people have had an increase in consciousness and awareness. And a lot of that has happened over the last 25 years, right? Um, so the second part of this, and this is where EFT is so valuable, is the capacity to, once you have new information, the capacity to change the applied meaning that you are giving to any given thing in your world, right? So if you start out with somebody who, as a child, grows up with the belief that, I'm sorry, my cat is really insisting on attention right now. I know, baby.
Oh,
Um, so if you have somebody who grows up in a solid family structure where people get married and they have children and they buy a house and they do all those things, and then, or maybe mom and dad broke those rules a little bit and got divorced, but they still see grandma and grandpa stay together all those years, right? And now they're trying to create a relationship in a world of Tinder, right? Where they're looking for a 90s relationship or an 80s or a 70s or a 60s or a 50s relationship that was based on the concept of mutual respect and staying. And now they get into a world where swipe to the next option is always present. How do you redefine your own expectations about a relationship, what a relationship can be and what a relationship can mean in a way that's still aligned with who you are, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but still be able to function inside of a world where that is now the expression of society that is vomited all over us, right?
yeah. And I think I can tell you how I navigate that. Like I have gone through things that rip the rug out from underneath my reality. And I know what that feels like. And then what do you hold on to? And I found that like the only thing for me that helped gave me like a sense of reality was just the idea that like everything in my world I've created my experiences in my world. And if I can't hold on to that reality that, in the past, the so-called past, then all I can do is hold on to just the love that I feel for the experiences that I'm having currently. So, like grounding myself in my experiences through the feeling of loving those creations. Like I love my creations.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's too weird or esoteric, but like that's
No,
the
it's just
only way to describe
it's
it.
moving into fifth dimension, right? So space, third dimension is height, weight, depth. Fourth dimension, you know this stuff, but fourth dimension is when you add time. Fifth dimension is when you go into the position or the role of the observer, right? The objective, all-loving observer. That's fifth dimensional consciousness, right? There's a reason why the Marvel people are all chasing the Tesseract, right? The Tesseract is fifth dimensional consciousness. It's the observer, right? So when you were saying, okay, I take full responsibility, which is very different from saying I take blame. And there's a fine line between the two. I take full responsibility for the conscious creation or even the unconscious creation of my reality. You are stepping out of third dimensional reality into fifth dimensional reality to see yourself from the objective perspective and say, even within third dimension where I'm making choices and making decisions and making errors, I can love myself. That's
Yeah.
that's fifth dimensional experience, right?
Yeah, and so I'm curious to know, like, how do you use EFT, like, in that aspect? Like, how do you use EFT to bring that into your consciousness, into your
It's a good
reality?
it's a good question. So this is where we were talking a little bit earlier about what's the difference between a paradigm shift and a cognitive shift. So with EFT, right, the goal is to be able to look at the limiting belief, which is what, meaning is going to be a belief, right? I have a belief that a marriage should last for 40 years in order to be for me to be lovable by God, right? I've had that client sit down in front of me, somebody who desperately needed a divorce, but because they had the belief that God would send them to hell if they divorced, they had to make their life, their marriage last a lifetime, even if it meant a lifetime of self-flagellation, right? And so in a situation like that, you have to be able to examine the belief within the tapping sequence to see if cognitive shifts can come around. Now that gets dangerous in a situation like that because you can never challenge someone's beliefs in God, right? That's not going anywhere. Good luck.
Right.
Good luck, right?
Yeah, but it's not happening.
Um, but to use the tapping as a way to examine the belief and allow them to have that aha moment that goes, well, maybe that isn't the only way to see it. And to allow that cognitive shift to surface, that paradigm shift to surface, so that they can now entertain the creation of something new. Because sometimes you have to collapse the old belief in order for a new belief or an old meaning to create a new meaning that can give your life new meaning.
Totally. And I see that like just little shifts over time. A client is hopefully working with you, for a while. Little
Right.
shifts over time are better than something that creates a huge shift all at once.
Well, it depends on if the shift leaves a gap.
That's true. I mean, the word better is a judgment.
No, it's
It's
okay.
the only word I have right now.
We're allowed to compare things, right? Um, But yeah, it depends on whether the shift leaves a gap. So if you can use the opportunity to collapse the old belief and use it to not necessarily insert, but to allow space for a new belief without fracturing the person's, you know, place in the world, then those big aha moments can be amazing.
Let me ask you this because students ask me this all the time, Deborah. Like,
Mhm.
when can I introduce the positive? Right? This is kind
So,
of similar. Like, how
yeah.
can we introduce new beliefs, you know?
Right. So there's so the technique that I like to think that I like to use is not an introduction of the positive. We do talk about that in the level 3 training. And again, I'm sorry if my cat is really being loud.
Oh no, cats are allowed on the podcast. Totally.
Okay. All right. Um, they're not down for their afternoon nap yet, which will happen soon. So I don't use a lot of positive tapping myself because I feel like it's me creating an outcome. And that's it's inappropriate, right? That's how it looks to me. Instead, what I will use is more of the what if technique, right? So what if uh I'm not going to use the word God here because what if God is a forgiving God? Okay, we'll use God. What if God is a forgiving God who understands that change is a part of the natural evolution of a relationship? What if there was a loving relationship out there for me that was going to be more in line with who I am and that that was forgivable? Do you see?
Yes.
So rather than inserting a specific positive thing, oh, I'm happy now because God loves me for staying in my relationship, right? I would go more with the introduction of particular ideas that someone could then go, oh, and cling on to that. That would be more my own approach to it.
Absolutely, because it's an open-ended question. Is what if is an open-ended question, and the clients to find their own answer because when you ask the question, the brain will find an answer, will look for the answer.
Right.
And
And it will create a new reality based on the answer that it chooses. Right. So if I'm inserting it like I would do, say, if it was a hypnosis session, I might insert something there. Well, that insertion of something into that gap, into that space, might take their life into a whole different direction that to me might look like the right direction, but their soul might be longing for something different because they have to have a different experience. Maybe not an experience that I would want them to have or to create, but the experience that their soul needs to be creating in that moment. They're different. I
yeah,
will say, can I say one more thing? Because I know
yeah,
we're running short on time. Another thing that I learned from the book, Another Roadside Attraction, that still sits with me 40 years later, was the same character said, uh, consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. And so he would make it a point throughout the book to change his mind about everything often. And people made it seem like that inconsistency was a weakness. And in those days, I would have hated knowing somebody like that. But you just said, and then he says, consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. So for us to use the meaning of meaning as a growth tool
mhm.
is to start by giving ourselves permission to be inconsistent. So as a young person, I used to weigh the facts. I was on the debate team in college and I would weigh the facts. So I would do all the research and I would weigh the facts and then I would make my decision. And then once my decision was made, I had something to defend. And I had all the facts at my disposal in order to defend my well-researched position. But then I learned consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. If I couldn't learn to debate both sides of the issue with equal veracity or with equal furor,
Yeah,
I wouldn't going to be a very good debater. But it's also that way in life. If you aren't able to learn how to see both sides of a story and to allow both sides of a story to be a part of your creation of your reality, you have a singular path, and there's going to be a lot of collisions on that path
right.
because you're going to be presented with new information as you go. If you can't shift, if you can't allow yourself to be inconsistent or to make changes in the way you believe something, in the meaning that you have given something. So I have a relationship that I was in for 9 years in the past, 9 years in a past relationship. That relationship had the central meaning of my life. It was everything. I would do everything to protect that relationship. I intended to stay in that relationship for a lifetime. But as new information came forward and I changed, I had to be willing and able to change the meanings that I applied to my relationship in order to make decisions that were more aligned with who I am. I had to start by being inconsistent and from observing the various options about how I could apply meaning to something. And then if I had to tap out the barriers, oh God, leaving my marriage or my relationship is going to mean this, it's going to mean that. My family will be splintered. In this case, I don't have kids, but the kids will be hurt. All of those things that you put as barriers in the way to transmutation or transformation. That's where tapping comes in because it's going to help you to reconcile the inconsistencies within you so that you can create new meaning, and from that new meaning create a different experience.
Yeah, and it totally tracks with my experience of tapping because honestly, before I started using tapping, I did a lot of other techniques and meditation,
Too.
yoga, like, oh my gosh, I can't even list.
I got it. I used to have a wall in my office, an entire wall in my office where we had framed our certifications, my ex-partner and I. So all of my certificates were on one side, all of his certificates on the other. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters about any of those certifications are what awareness and skill set that you now carry within you. That's going to help you to transform your own life and help transform the lives of others.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's just the thing is that I was ready. I was when tapping came into my life, I was ready for those awarenesses. And tapping allowed me to have those awarenesses and allowed me to regulate my nervous system so I could actually pay attention and have those awarenesses. Because before my nervous system was such a wreck that like, I couldn't pay attention to anything.
Yeah.
It's in
Yeah.
total.
If your energy was still fragmented into the past. If you can't get your energy into present time, which is one of um, the greatest gifts of EFT tapping, is that by healing your past, you get your energy into present time. And from your present time space, you can now create the reality that you want.
Oh my God, I love that. That's such a beautiful way of saying it, is getting your
But
energy, that coming into the present. Yes.
it's all from Carolyn Mace. I can't take any credit.
Yeah, Carolyn Mace. Love her. Love her. Well,
For
thank you so
sure.
much for being here with me today. I so appreciate this conversation, and hopefully we'll have more in the future.
Yeah, of course. I appreciated it too. I hope it wasn't sounding very pretentious and above everybody. It was really meant to help people a make conscious changes in their own life by recognizing that consistency is their friend and they can change their mind about what meanings they've given to anything. And if that's a paradigm shift that makes people's lives better, then it was worth doing.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you're interested in checking out Deborah's Center for EFT Studies, we're going to put the link in the description below the video and you can visit her website.
Thanks. That's kind of you.
Yes. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye bye.